my god. Okay, Harvard. View status update. I got into Harvard! Oh my
For most people, getting accepted into college is one of the most defining moments in life, and society has convinced us all that this tradition of higher education will guarantee a future of happiness and success. But the truth is, every single one of us are looked at as prey. And unfortunately for many, instead of living out the American dream that college promises, their entire lives are stolen before they ever have a chance to live it. And it can all be traced back to this exact moment. Now, it may or may not surprise you that collectively we are in an insane amount of student loan debt. And it's almost hard to put into context just how much debt we're in as a nation. So let's look at it like this. Most of us think of $1 million as a ton of money, right? Now imagine 1,000 million, which is the same as 1 billion. Take it a step further and try to imagine 1,000 billion, and that comes close to the amount of student loan debt that we've racked up as a country. But to break it down to a more personal level, nearly 43 million Americans are carrying student loan debt. So if we divide the total debt by the number of those carrying loans, on average, each person holds about $40,000 of college debt. And with the rising cost of things like food, housing, and transportation, the added burden of student loan debt payments makes it impossible for the average person to make ends meet. So much so that nearly 5 million people in college debt haven't made a payment toward their loans in over a year or more. Now, considering all this, you might be wondering if it's even possible for us to put a dent in the $1.6 trillion student debt. But I think a more important question is, how did we get here in the first place? Prior to 1965, student loans weren't really a thing. But if money was loaned for school, it would be in small amounts to a small number of people for specific types of studies aimed at helping to keep the nation secure. But something major happened back then that turned a program intended to help people get an education into a system designed to line the pockets of the rich while millions of Americans foot the bill. In the mid-1960s, a document was signed by the White House that increased the amount of loans available to the public to pursue an education. And while this sounds good at face value, it was done by allowing private banks to give out student loans on the government's behalf. That's right, greedy, heartless, corrupt banks. Organizations that get rich by selling debt products to people, then charging those people a hidden fee for simply taking out a loan. And later in this video, you'll see exactly how this purposefully hidden fee has kept millions of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. But just know for now that the government's decision to involve banks in handing out student loans tricked every single one of us to think higher education was a system designed to help us live a better life, when in reality, it's nothing more than a targeted campaign to keep us broke. See, over the past several decades, we've been fed a certain storyline from the media, guidance counselors, and even friends and family that somehow a college education will lead to success. And beyond that, society paints college life out to be the picture of the in crowd. The annual ratings list, the sporting events, parties, amenities, and the unique campus experience. But this is all just an organized effort to increase the popular demand of attending a university while quietly draining the pockets of millions of Americans, which is apparent by looking at the explosion of tuition costs compared to virtually any other expense in our daily lives. And digging deeper into this, beyond the fancy college advertising and the endless influence to sign up to go to college, there are a number of disturbing details that these institutions are hiding from us. A recent study that analyzed the resumes of 10 million graduates shows that nearly half of them work in jobs outside of their degree field 5 years after completing college. So despite all the traditional advice we hear about attending college, based on this data, millions of people are going tens of thousands of dollars into debt to get a degree that they'll likely never use. And that's if they graduate. Another interesting detail that no one ever talks about is the college dropout rate. And according to multiple sources, around 30% of students leave school without ever completing their degree. So the fact of the matter is, many people are on the hook for paying back thousands of dollars over years of their life without having anything to show for it. Now, in my opinion, these things would be enough for me to reconsider borrowing money to go to school. But what I find to be the saddest part of this whole college phenomenon is the fact that no matter how much effort people put in to paying off their college debt, millions are stuck with it hanging over their heads from the time they become young adults until the time they die. Recent data shows that the average time it takes people to pay off their student loans is between 20 to 25 years. Now, obviously, that's an average. So some people take less time to pay it off, some people take longer to pay it off, and some people never pay it off. But when we look at the age group breakdown of how this debt is spread out, this picture becomes a lot more gloomy. Out of the 43 million people holding the $1.6 trillion of student loan debt, around 7 million borrowers are aged 24 and younger, and they hold just under $100 billion of the debt. For people ages 25 to 34, the debt among the 15 million borrowers jumps close to $500 billion. Ages 35 to 49, the amount of debt again spikes to nearly $650 billion between 15 million borrowers. Now, I can't lie, even when I was looking at these numbers, as we get to the older age brackets, this is where it starts to get pretty sad. For people between the age of 50 to 61, there are collectively about 6 million borrowers that are still holding around $300 billion of the college debt. And for ages 62 and older, when people should be enjoying retirement in their golden years, nearly 3 million Americans are still saddled with over $120 billion of the student debt. Now, looking at this trend, it might seem backwards that the older people are getting, the more student loan debt they're holding. But that's not an accident. Remember that hidden fee I mentioned earlier that banks charge for borrowing money? It's known in the industry as interest. And here's how it's keeping people in college debt for their entire lives while the rich just keep getting richer. Let's say someone borrows the average student loan amount of $40,000 from the bank. In most cases, people take about 20 years to pay off their college debt. And at the time of this recording, the average interest rate that places charge for letting people borrow money for school is around 6.53%. Now, once I hit the calculate button, it's going to show exactly how much money people are paying in interest above the amount that they borrowed. And just for fun, I challenge you to try and guess how much the total will be between the loan and the interest over 20 years, because no one I've asked has ever come close. Leave your guess in the comments below. But before we get to that, I have to explain the sneaky process that banks use to rip us off that I guarantee will make you sick to your stomach. And that process is called amortization. Now, what amortization shows is how much of your monthly student loan payment will go toward the $40,000 that you borrowed, also known as principal, versus how much of your payment goes toward lining the pockets of the rich people that lent you the money, known as interest. So in this scenario, the first student loan payment of $298, only $81 would go toward the $40,000 you borrowed, while $217 would go toward making the rich richer. And if you were thinking the next month would be any better, you'd be wrong. The second payment of $298 toward the student loan is pretty much the same as the first one. Only $81 of the payment goes toward the borrowed amount, and another $217 goes towards lining the pockets of the rich. It's actually not until 10 years into this process that the amount of your monthly payment that goes toward what you borrowed becomes higher than the amount that you're paying in interest. And this continues to go on for months and months and years until, congratulations, it's now 20 years later and you finally paid off the loan that you took out to go to school when you were 18. But the additional amount you paid in interest alone is an insane $32,000 that went to helping the rich get richer, bringing the total you paid to go to college $72,000. And this is how, over the past 50 years, society has intentionally fooled us all into thinking that a higher education is the determining factor to living a successful life, while quietly stealing the lives of millions of Americans. But the good thing is, there's hope for those that want to avoid this cycle of being taken advantage of by these institutions. And the only way to protect yourself against this greed and corruption is knowledge. Even though financial literacy isn't taught like it should be, I was able to learn a method to break this cycle of debt from a book called The Total Money Makeover. It was written by one of the most well-known financial influencers in the world, which is none other than Dave Ramsey. And over the past 30 years, he's helped millions of people get out of debt, avoid taking out loans from these corrupt banks, and actually live a life of freedom and success. If you're tired of living paycheck to paycheck, I would highly encourage you check out this book. And you can get it for free today with a trial on Audible by using the link in the description below. It helped me pay off 6 figures worth of loans and become debt free, and I'm certain it could do the same for you. But please understand that even if you were to never take out a loan your entire life and never pay a penny of interest, society has set up yet another way to keep you living paycheck to paycheck. And to learn what that is, click or tap the screen to watch this video next.